tonight. The disgraceful, radical, extreme Democratic Socialist Party, they had what will likely be the first of many failed votes to attempt to impeach a duly elected president. Will somebody please give these people a copy of the Constitution? We'll have more coming up. Also, we begin tonight with members of the, quote, squad ramping up their attacks on anyone and everyone who dares to disagree with their extreme, radical socialist ideas. Now, 2020 hopefuls, they have been put on notice. Everyone in the Democratic Party, you better fall in line, or A, you might be called a racist, or B, they are keeping the squad the equivalent of an enemies list of fellow Democrats that oppose them, I guess, so they can campaign against them. It's getting that ugly. Now, the squad has already lobbed racism charges against both President Trump and even their own speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And while Pelosi is totally powerless, as we've been telling you, to defend herself, the president is firing back in a big way. Just moments ago, the president wrapped up what was a massive rally in Greenville in North Carolina, where he had a very special message for the new radical leaders of this Democratic extreme socialist party. Take a look.
So Representative Omar blamed the United States for the terrorist attacks on our country, saying that terrorism is a reaction to our involvement in other people's affairs. Her colleague, Representative Rashida Tlaib, agreed with Omar's characterization of 9/11 and said that members of Congress who support Israel forgot what country they represent. Cortez said that illegal immigrants are more American than any person who seeks to keep them out ever will be. Can you believe that? That's what she's saying. She described contemporary America, that's you, that's me, that's all of us, as garbage. 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 And they're so angry. Even yesterday, they went on the stage. I said, let me watch this. And the anger, they were trying to be nice, but it's hard. It's hard for them to do that.
You know, smelly Walmart voters, irredeemable deplorables, people that cling to their God, their guns, their Bibles, and religion. Few politicians have had the courage to call out the radical base of the Democratic Party, but that's why we, the American people, elected Donald Trump, in spite of what New York, California, Washington, and other liberal states wanted. And while the media mob, the Democrats, attack this president, they do it compulsively, obsessively. His approval ratings among Republicans keeps going way up. And today, new polls show the president's numbers actually increased by 5 points. According to another poll, 49% of likely voters, certainly a plurality, believe the accusations of racism against President Trump are nothing more than a political ploy. That is up 6 percentage points over the last poll conducted. And here's why. Let me help educate the radical masses. While you may not like it, the term love it, love America, leave America, it has nothing to do with race. And by the way, is hardly a new characterization or concept to the loudest critics of the what we call Blame America First crowd. Was it racist for Senator Kamala Harris to tell President Trump today that he needs to, quote, go back from where he came from? She did that today. And get this, in 2016, scores of celebrities, other media elites, remember they all vowed to leave the United States if President Trump was elected? Oh, yeah, there are their names. Well, there's nothing racist about that. They didn't like him. The only problem, none of them actually left. We even offered a plane with caviar and champagne, but they had to promise never to come back. And tonight, when the media mob and the Democrats focus their daily attacks on the president every second, minute, hour of every 24-hour day, it's just one pathetic last-ditch effort to take the president down. They still have not accepted the 2016 election results of we the people. The 9-month FBI investigation, we'll use the words of Lisa Page. Nothing. They found nothing. Peter Strzok, no there as it relates to collusion, conspiracy to conspire with Russia. The bipartisan Senate investigation, same result, nothing. The House investigation, nothing. Mueller concluded no conspiracy at all with Russia, no collusion, and, of course, no obstruction as per the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and Office of Legal Counsel. So their phantom charges of obstruction and collusion all fell short. And the great likelihood is that 1 week from tonight, I'm looking forward to this. when Mueller testifies before Congress, and I would even argue at this moment, if he's silly enough to testify before Congress, because he'll have to answer real questions from real Republicans, I would say the odds are very high that it will be another boomerang against the Democrats. Even if Devin Nunes is right, they're likely coordinating what they're going to say and how he's going to respond. Why do I suspect they would do something like that? Now, what do Democrats have left in their playbook? All right, Russia, 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 that's a dud. Obstruction, obstruction, a dud. Okay, we'll try racism, racism. That will be a dud, too. Let's use the playbook the Democrats use in every single election season, although it's not every 2 and 4 years anymore, as I've always laid out on this program and showed you ad after ad after ad in the history of. No, it's like every day now. You have hysteria boiling over. The Democratic Congressman Al Green, he actually launched what was the first of probably many pathetic attempts to impeach the president, resoundingly defeated in the House of Representatives. This is a national embarrassment. Will somebody please get these radical Democrats a constitution and tell them to read it? If not, maybe we can have somebody read it for them, whatever they want, because they don't clearly understand it. Take a look.
I just heard that the United States House of Representatives has overwhelmingly voted to kill the most ridiculous project I've ever been involved in. The resolution, how stupid is that, on impeachment. I want to thank those Democrats because many of them voted for us. The vote was a totally lopsided 332 to 95 to 1.
Now, of course, Congressman Green is just doing the bidding of the new leaders of the Democratic Party. Remember this from newly elected Congresswoman. Remember Tlaib? Remember she said this? So nice, so welcoming and warm and inclusive. Take a look.
When your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
And during an interview today on CBS Today, Tlaib offered no apology or retraction for her vile comments about the President of the United States. Why would you ever apologize for doing that? Take a look.
From day one, I truly believe that he has committed impeachable offenses. And me, you know...
But even if you believe that, the fact that you called him...
I didn't do it on the House floor. And I'm going to be unapologetic in myself. 70% of Americans curse. I am real. This is who I am. I am rooted in where I come from. And it's very common for me and for many of my residents to say things like that. But
so you don't regret that?
Absolutely not. I'm unapologetic about it.
All right, this radical Democratic Party is in a very dark, very scary place. There are no more moderates in today's extreme Democratic Party as socialism is completely and radicalism completely taken over. Even far-left liberal Nancy Pelosi, the San Francisco liberal treat, is now considered too moderate. The so-called squad is controlling all aspects of the Democratic Party's message and their platform. Anyone who gets in their way or doesn't fully support their radical dreams is accused of either bigotry or whatever. And today, Congresswoman Tlaib became the second member of the squad to actually accuse her own House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, of racism. This is number two of the four radicals that are leading in the House and influencing the 2020 Democratic candidates. Let's take a look.
Are you speaking to Nancy Pelosi?
Our teams are in communication. Our chiefs are.
But shouldn't it be a face-to-face with you and the Speaker, as opposed to your people and her people?
Right,
Shouldn't it be a face-to-face?
But you're new members of the Congress. But no, I'm very protective.
With all due respect, she doesn't need protection.
Right.
I want to know if you are speaking.
She's the new member, not the Speaker.
No, but I want to know.
She has every right to sit down with her in any moment, any time, with any of us.
Yeah.
She is Speaker of the House. She can ask for a meeting to sit down with us for clarification. The fact of the knowledge is, and I've done racial justice work in our country for a long time, acknowledge the fact that we are women of color. So when you do single us out, be aware of that and what you're doing.
Pretty serious accusation against the so-called Speaker, really the Speaker in name only, Nancy Pelosi. And as I keep reminding you, she's now merely a bystander in this new radical socialist extreme Democratic Party, which is why she can't even defend herself from their attacks. Remember, she asked last week, if you have anything to say it to my face. Oh, what did AOC do? She goes right to Twitter and runs out publicly and attacks her again. Take a look.
Are you concerned that the president is goading you? Is there any danger playing
you know what?
hand?
With all due respect, let's not waste our time on that. We're talking about what we're going to do to help the American people. Our caucus is unified on all of that. Throughout the whole campaign, I said to the candidates, don't even mention his name. Everybody knows who he is. You don't have to describe him to anybody. We're not having him set our agenda. We're setting our own agenda.
Now, she's not setting the agenda at all, right? Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, Omar, and Presley are running the show. The 2020 presidential hopefuls, they're all sucking up to this new leadership. Their beliefs are beyond scary. It would destroy America as we know it. We know about their dreams to turn America into a socialist eco-state known as the Green New Deal, but perhaps even more alarming are their views by some in this group of four on Israel and the Jewish people. Congresswoman Tlaib, who you just saw, actually wrote for Louis Farrakhan's racist anti-Semitic newspaper. She also pals around with a known bigot. Her name, Linda Sarsour. In fact, Sarsour was an invited guest at Tlaib's swearing in. Sarsour openly supports Sharia law, blamed her bad reputation on the, quote, Jewish media. And as you can see, Congresswoman Omar also hangs out with Linda Sarsour. No surprise there. Omar has frequently tweeted anti-Semitic tropes. She once accused lawmakers of being controlled by, quote, Jewish money. Remember the phrase, it's all about the Benjamins? Omar even accused evil Israel of hypnotizing the world. But in today's interview with Gayle King, well, Congresswoman Omar said she has no regrets. She regrets nothing. Actually burst out laughing when asked about anti-Semitism. Let's take a look.
Oftentimes there are things that you might say might not hold weight for you, but to someone else, right? The way that we hear and consume information is very different than how the next person might.
So you don't regret your words either?
I do not.
Would you like people to? Would you like to make it clear that you are not anti-Semitic?
Oh, certainly not. Yes.
Would you like to make that clear?
Yes. I mean, and that. Nothing I said, at least to me, was meant for that purpose.
Well, at least to me. Okay. Well, yes, no, anti-Semitism, it's no laughing matter. Neither is al-Qaeda or the way Americans talk about those that killed 3,000 of our fellow Americans on 9/11 or the terrorist group Hezbollah. Yet Congresswoman Omar finds apparently all that to be somewhat humorous and funny, as we have previously played on this program. Now, her behavior, obvious beliefs are pretty vile, pretty sickening. Omar now plans to introduce a resolution declaring her support for the anti-Semitic BDS movement, which is a boycott all things Israel. And Omar and other members of her squad are now the perfect representation of today's two-faced Democratic Party, built on selective and phony and feigned moral outrage. Each week they call Trump, other Republicans, racist, sexist. You know the routine. Yet no outrage over Omar's virulent anti-Semitism, no concern over Tlaib's work in Farrakhan's paper. Meanwhile, Democrat Ralph Northam, you know, the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, apparently sleeping peacefully in the governor's mansion after his fellow Democrats didn't really seem to care that he dressed up either in blackface or in a Ku Klux Klan outfit. Wonder if Donald Trump did that, how they'd react. 2020 Democrats are busy kissing the ring of the Reverend Al Sharpton, who became well known for anti-Semitic, bigoted language. We played a lot of it last night. Hillary Clinton's mentor. She said her mentor, Robert Byrd, well, he used to be in the Ku Klux Klan. Al Gore's father tried to block the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that historic legislation. Lyndon Johnson relied on Republican support to get it passed and went forward. The Democrats went forward with a filibuster. The list goes on. We don't even have time to list all of creepy, crazy, sleepy Uncle Joe's racist remarks and policies over the years. And let's talk about charges of sexual misconduct. Again, selective, feigned moral outrage. Only when it's a Republican or Donald Trump supporter or Donald Trump appointee. Remember the I believers and the Kavanaugh hearings? Well, they're nowhere to be found when a Democrat is accused of wrongdoing. Case in point, the lieutenant governor of Virginia, who Gayle King interviewed, two women, one accused him of rape, another said violent sexual assault, both telling people at the time he's still in office, and I haven't heard a word from one of the I believers. You got Keith Ellison. He got a promotion. Bill Clinton served 2 terms as president. What about the issue of Russia collusion? what, 2.5 years of conspiracy theories, lies, and a hoax? Hillary's bought and paid for dirty Russian dossier put together by a foreign spy with funneled money, filled with Russian lies. As John Solomon will join us in a minute points out, even the FBI knew 90+% of it was a lie. And now we also know that it was unverifiable because, of course, Christopher Steele never stood behind his own dossier. I don't have any idea if it's true, he said under oath. And don't forget, the media just spent months hyping phantom claims of obstruction against Trump. Did any of them ever talk about Hillary subpoenaed emails that she deleted, and then the bleach bit to the hard drive and acid wash the 33,000 emails? And then, of course, beating up the devices with hammers, removing SIM cards, and by the way, other evidence, all of that happening? So when you turn on conspiracy theory, Democratic state TV, either MSDNC or fake news CNN, and you hear the echo chamber in their full, typical daily freakout mode, just know that it's more selective moral outrage. They don't really care about these issues. They only care about them if they can use them to bludgeon a Republican, a conservative, or Trump, or anybody that likes Trump. And nobody calls their bluff better than President Trump.